messing about. There'll be no messing about forgetting to record like I did on Tisha B'Av. I'm in big trouble from over in America, from Sharon and Larry Feingold, who wanted to hear the Tisha B'Av shir, and I forgot to record it. So I'm in bad books there. So
I sent you a chat, John. I sent you a chat, Johnny, when you started. Are you recording?
I never saw it because I was using my phone to do it because we don't have any internet in the shul. So yeah, so it wasn't recorded. But anyway, never mind. We'll have to do it again next year, please God.
Please God.
Right, let's get into the Gemara. We are on page 10a towards the bottom, and if you are in the Steinsaltz, it's on page 51. If you've got your hard copy, I will share the screen with you. Okay, can you see the screen? Yeah. Okay, so just a quick recap. We'll just go back a little bit. We started last week a new section, which was how many judges are required to judge a case where if the accused is found guilty, he will suffer the punishment of makot, lashes. And the Tanna Kama says 3 judges, and we went through all of that, working on the basis of plurals. Ushfatum was a plural, the judges judge, so if it's a plural, it must be a minimum of 2. We can't have a even number, so we have to add one that makes your 3. We then had a whole discussion about some further plurals in the verse, and we dismissed those, and we ended up with 3. And then that's where we left it. And now we're going to discuss the dissenting view. Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Yishmael says that we don't need 3 judges. We require 23 judges for a case of lashes. Now, I asked you last week why that might be the case, to get a little preview. And somebody, I think it might have been Michael, said, well, he might die, and then it will become a capital case. And there is something to that, as we will see. So let's go and see what Rabbi Yishmael's thinking is when he says we need 23 judges. We know, don't we, from some time ago on page 8 or 9, that the concept of 23 judges is a capital case. We had this whole discussion for a few weeks, didn't we, about the Motzi Shem Ra, the defamer, and whether that case was going to turn into a capital case because of potential adultery evidence. And that is why we thought it might be 23, because any capital case requires 23 judges. So we have already, because we are experienced in this Gemara already, we've got an inkling that Rabbi Yishmael's thinking is going to include that somewhere along the line, this is going to be connected to be a capital case. So let's have a look what he says. The Mishnah says, and this is right back at the beginning, our very first Mishnah on page 2a, Mishum Rabbi Yishmael Amru, they said in the name of Rabbi Yishmael, Be'esrim Ushlosha, cases which may result in lashes must be heard by 23 judges. My ta'ama, to Rabbi Yishmael. What is the reasoning? Ta'am is a reason. Yeah, ta'am is a reason. My ta'ama, my is the same as ma in Hebrew. My ta'ama. What is the reasoning? De Rabbi Yishmael. Daled and Shin, by the way, can be interchangeable in Aramaic and Hebrew. So de Rabbi Yishmael is like shel Rabbi Yishmael. So of. So if you've got a de at the beginning of the word, it usually means of. So my Tama, what is the reasoning of Rabbi Yishmael? Why does he say that? Now, what's interesting is we don't hear from Rabbi Yishmael himself, because remember, this is quoting a Mishnah, and this is a Gemarah. Mishnah having been written down around about 200 CE, the Gemarah having been written down 300 years later. So it wasn't possible to do the obvious and say, well, let's go and ask him, why did he say 23? Because he ain't there anymore. So Abaye, who is present at this time in 500, he proposes a suggestion as to what Rabbi Yishmael's thinking might be. And he says, Atya, Rasha, Rasha, Mechayvai mitot. Okay, so Atya, it comes out, it is derived from. Rasha, Rasha, what's this all about? The word Rasha is mentioned in it's mentioned in a number of places, but there are two specific places that Abaye is pointing us to where the word Rasha is used. And when you have a word which is used in two places, not always, but you can often derive something from one place to another. So, in other words, in our case, there are two psukim which we're going to look at together in a minute, where the word Rasha is used, Rasha being an evil person, a wicked person. So we look at these two psukim and we say, because they're using the same word, there must be some similarities between the case. What can we learn one case from the other? And that has a specific name. That technique has a specific name. Does anybody know what the specific name of that technique of comparing one pasuk to another where they have the same word? Does anybody know what it's called in Hebrew? Yes, Johnny.
I have read it, but I remember what it was from the other day. A Gemarah Shava, is it?
A Gemarah Shava. A Gemarah Shava. Now, we all know what a Gemarah is. A Gemarah is a decree. Shava, what's the word Shava mean?
Shava.
Go on, Marcel. I think you said it, Marcel. Unmute yourself.
Equal to.
Equal to, that's right. Shaveh means equal. So a Gemarah Shava, and over here, if you look on the screen on the right-hand side, Rabbi Steinsaltz translates it beautifully. A verbal analogy. So it's an equaling. You've got two words that are equal. In our case, Rasha, Rasha, and a Gemarah is a decree that you can use something from one of those psukim to another. Now, where have you come across those words Gemarah Shava before? Where have you come across those words? Go on, Leon.
Rabbi Yishmael, Omer.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Yishmael Omer. Now, one wonders, is this the same Rabbi Yishmael? Well, the answer is yes, it is. You will all be familiar with that because you will have said it this morning in your davening, wouldn't you? Rabbi Yishmael Omer, Rabbi Yishmael says, Bishlosha esrei midot haTorah nidreshet bahen. He expounds 13 biblical exegeses, right? I'm sure you all know that word exegeses. I'm sure you all use it on a daily basis in your day-to-day conversation. And of course, this is one of those words that you actually have to go to the Hebrew to understand what the English means. In the Hebrew, it's much easier. It says, Rabbi Yishmael bishlosh esrei midot, in 13 different manners. So an exegesis, for the uninitiated, is a derivation. It's the way, it's a a method of derivation. It's what we would call in Hebrew drush. And that's why it says, Rabbi Yishmael Omer b'shlosh esrei midot haTorah nidreshet, from the word drasha. Okay, it's the same word. So we say in our davening in the morning, Rabbi Yishmael tells us that there are 13 exegetical principles. In other words, 13 methods of deriving things from psukim. And the two most famous of all of those are the first two. Without looking in your Siddur, who can tell me the first two of the 13 exegetical principles?
Binyan something.
Binyan, that's a later one, Leon. That's not the first or the second. Anyone?
Kal v'chomer gzeira shava.
Thank you very much, Liran. Kal v'chomer and gezeira shava. Kal v'chomer, what's a kal v'chomer? Kal v'chomer is, we learn from a light case, the more severe case. So, for example, if it is forbidden to, I don't know, off the top of my head, if it is forbidden to pick up a pen on Shabbat, then it is certainly forbidden to write with a pen on Shabbat. So that's called a kal v'chomer. You learn something from a more lenient case to a more severe case. That's kal v'chomer. That's probably the most famous of the 13 principles of Rabbi Yishmael. The second one is the second most famous, and that is our one here, a gezeira shava. So when you daven tomorrow morning and you say kal v'chomer gezeira shava, you will know what we're talking about with gezeira shava, because we're going to see one right now. We're going to see a gezeira shava from the word rasha. So we're going to see two different places in the Torah where the word rasha is used. And the Gemarah employs Rabbi Yishmael's principle of exegesis and derives a law from one pasuk to another. And this is Abaye's suggestion as to why Rabbi Yishmael wants 23 judges. And it is the same Rabbi Yishmael that we're talking about who wrote these 13 principles. So let's have a look at our Gezeira Shava. Over here where I'm in on the screen, Ktiv Hacha. It is written Hacha, here. It's written here. What's here? Here is in our pasuk. Which pasuk are we talking about? We're talking about the pasuk that we've been talking about earlier in Devarim. It's in chapter 25, if I'm not mistaken. Let me get it on the screen for
25,
you.
yes, it's 25.
35.
I think it's 25.
25.
Chapter 25 of Devarim. Here it is on the screen for you now.
It's in Vayikra 35.
No, it's in Devarim 25. We're going to come to Bamidbar 35 in a minute. That's the second pasuk. But the first pasuk, that Hacha, the one that we're dealing with, is this one here that's on the screen now. Leon, if you have your Devarim handy, you could read verses 1 and 2 and 3 for us.
When there will be a grievance between people, and they approach the court, and they judge them, and they vindicate the righteous one and find the wicked one guilty, it will be that if the wicked one is liable to lashes, the judge shall cast him down and strike him before him, according to his wickedness, by a count. 40 shall he strike him. He shall not add, lest he strike him an additional blow beyond these, and your brother will be degraded in your eyes.
Okay, now those three psukim are the basis of our Gemarah that we're talking about now and that we talked about last week. Because we're talking about a case where he's going to incur the punishment of lashes. And the question that the Gemarah is dealing with is how many judges do we need? The Tanna Kama said 3. Rabbi Yishmael is quoted as saying 23. Abaye now comes along in order to try and explain Rabbi Yishmael's reasoning and says, there is a verbal analogy using the word Rasha. And he's quoting here our verse 2. V'haya im bin hakot harasha. And it shall be if the guilty one has incurred the penalty of lashes. So that's one pasuk. Now I'm going to show you the other pasuk, which the Gemara quotes, from which Rabbi Yishmael, according to Abaye, learns his opinion of 23 judges. And that is over here in Parashat Mas'eh, which we learned a couple of weeks ago. And it's Bamidbar chapter 35, verse 31. Leon, if you're ready.
Yes. You shall not accept ransom for the life of a murderer who is worthy of death, for he shall surely die.
Okay, let's just stop there. Let's read it in Hebrew. V'lo tikhu kofer lenefesh rotzeach, shall not take a ransom for the soul of or the life of a murderer. Asher hu rasha lamut, and he is a rasha. There's that word rasha, and that is the place from which Abaye takes his verbal analogy. Lamut, for death. Kimot yumat, for he shall be put to death. It's a funny pasuk, this. Why does it say asher hu rasha lamut? Why doesn't it say lo tikhu kofa lenefesh rotzeach asher hu dan lamut? He was judged to be worthy of the death penalty. He's a murderer. Kimot yumat, he has to be put to death. In other words, he can't buy. This pasuk is telling you that a murderer cannot buy his way out of the death penalty. And actually, you may say, well, that's pretty obvious, isn't it? No, not in those days. You have to remember the historical context. In those days, you could pay somebody, as it were, to die for you. If you had enough money, you could pay your way out of a death penalty. You could have a nice fat fine, and you get away with it. And the Torah is telling us no, natural justice must be seen to be done. And therefore, but it's a funny expression to have that word rasha. Doesn't really fit in. Would make more sense to say asher hu dan lamut or something like that, who's been judged to die. So I think that is why Abaye uses this pasuk for his Gezeirah Shava. Yes, Marcel.
Could it be the reason they've used Russia is that he was previously known to have been doing things that he shouldn't do, or warned?
Well, he certainly was warned,
or
because
not
he wouldn't.
Caught, or not
Yeah.
caught.
Well, we don't know about that. He needs to be warned, of course, otherwise he wouldn't get the death penalty. We know about that, don't we? We know he needs two witnesses. The witnesses have to warn him. We went through all of this in our Gemarah a few weeks ago. So he's certainly warning. I'm not sure what the word rasha adds. I don't think that he having form or not having form actually makes a difference. If he was a premeditated murderer with the appropriate warning, with the appropriate two witnesses, then he would be guilty and then would have the death penalty, whether it was his first offence or his, well, it couldn't be his second offence because he'd be dead. But I hear what you're saying. You're saying that maybe he's got form, but he couldn't have had a punishment previously because he didn't have the right witnesses or what have you. But I don't know that is taken into account.
Excuse me, John, does it say Russia there? I can't read it properly.
Yes, it's the word says
it looks like
Hu Rasha Lamut.
Oh, it says Russia. Okay.
Yeah. So I think that the reason that Abaye is using this pasuk for his Gezeirah Shava is because the word Rasha here is a little unusual. Let's put it that way. So let's go back to the Gemara.
It's got different meaning. It says who's guilty of death.
Yeah, he's a Rasha. He's a Rasha. What is a Rasha? Rasha is a guilty person.
Okay.
So let's go back to the Gemara. Where is it? Hang on.
Page 51.
There it is. Okay. Back on the screen, everyone. Yes?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So let's go over here. So Amar Abaye. Abaye says, Atya Rasha Rasha Mechayve Mitot. And you bring this verbal analogy, and we say like this: Ktiv Hacha. It's written here in our pasuk, V'haya im bin hakot harasha. If the guilty one, the evil, wicked person, is liable to hakot, is liable to this punishment of makot, lashes, and then uchtiv hatam, and it's written hatam means over there. In other words, in a different pasuk, and this is the one I've just quoted to you, asher hu rasha lamut. The Gemara gives us the end of the pasuk, doesn't give us the beginning, and it gives us the middle of the pasuk. It doesn't give us the beginning and it doesn't give us the end, because as we've said many times, we're meant to know it. But I've shown it to you now. Then this is Abaya's reasoning. Listen to this. Ma lehalan be'esrim ushlosha. Just as lehalan, over there, in that case, in the case of the pasuk in Bamidbar, where he's a murderer and he's going to get the death penalty. So just as over there in that case, be'esrim ushlosha, we would need 23 judges. Af can also here be'esrim ushlosha, that we need 23 judges. So the Gezeirah Shava goes like this. Abaye says, how does Rabbi Yishmael come along and tell us we need 23 judges? This is not a capital case. This is a case where he's going to get lashes. So he says there must be a reason why Rabbi Yishmael says so. And he brings us a pasuk which uses the same language in a somewhat unusual manner. And he derives one thing from another. He says, just as over there in our pasuk in Bamidbar, we need 23 judges because it's a capital case. Here, we need 23 judges, even though it's not a capital case. It's only, in inverted commas, a cases of lashes. Okay, so that is Abaye's opinion. Now, Abaye, what you find in Gemarah, in Mishnah as well, but mainly in Gemarah, you find that there are often the same antagonists. In other words, you find the same two rabbis arguing with one another. Hillel will argue with
Shammai.
Hillel will argue with Shammai. And in the Gemara, Abaye often argues with Rava. Abaye and Rava were often antagonists, in the same way as Hillel and Shammai were. So it's not surprising, therefore, that the next character that we meet is Rava, who says, I don't agree with you, Abaye. I don't think that is the reason that we need 23 judges. And this is Rava's reasoning. He goes like this. I don't think we need a Gezeirah Shava. Malkut, that's lashes. Bimkom mita omedet. Really, this punishment of lashes is a substitute. Bimkom. Bimkom, literally, in the place of. In the place of. We know that makom means the place. Bimkom is in the place of. I remember coming across that word, bimkom, whoa, how many years ago is it? I don't know. A long time ago, when I was 17, work it out, I'm 61. 44 years ago, I came across that word when I was working on Kibbutz Berot Yitzchak as a volunteer, and you lined up for your lunch, which was the main meal of the day, and if you didn't like what was on offer, which was usually schnitzel 4 days out of 5, because they grew turkeys there, so it was the cheapest food. As it so happens, I like schnitzel, so it wasn't a problem. But those people that didn't would ask, "Haim yesh bimkom?" Is there a bimkom? I thought, what on earth is that? And I'm thinking, what's a bimkom? And then somebody would bring him out something else. I don't know what it might have been. It might have been a salad or a boiled egg. I don't know, whatever it might have been. And I thought, well, a bimkom must be a salad. And the next day, the bimkom was something else. And then I realized that actually the word bimkom meant in place of. I thought, and the penny dropped. So you would ask for a bimkom. Is there something in place of this? So I don't want, because I'm sick of it. I had it for the last 5 days on the trot. So that's where I first came across the word bimkom. Completely irrelevant, but it's the kind of thing you never forget, even 44 years later. So, says Rava, Malkut bimkom mita omedet. Lashes, omedet, stands, from the word amida, same word as amida, that we stand up for, on the Shemona Esra, amida. So, Malkut, lashes, stands, bimkom, in place of mita. In other words, it's a kind of substitute. It's a replacement for the death penalty. And so, if that's the case, if it is a sort of replacement for a death penalty, then it needs to be judged in the same way as the original punishment that it's replacing would be judged, with 23 judges. So Rava says, I don't need your fancy dray, a bit of a dray of your Gemarah Shava. It's quite simple. I don't need rasha. It's quite simple. Malkut, the concept of lashes, is a bimkom. It's a substitute, it's a replacement for the punishment of death, and therefore it's judged in the same way. Okay, fair enough. That makes sense to you? No, Michael's not happy. Why are you not happy, Michael?
I don't think it can be a substitute.
Why not?
Because it's lashes is lashes. You're never going to get the death penalty for it. So why is it a substitute?
Okay, well, first of all, I think you're right. And you could have quoted, and I think you're almost quoting for me, the pasuk we've just read, haven't we? Back in Bamidbar. Let's just have a look at it again, if I can take you back there to Bamidbar 35. Read our pasuk from Bamidbar again, Leon, 35:31.
You shall not accept ransom for the life of a murderer who is worthy of death, for he shall surely die.
So that's very clear, isn't it? If you need the death penalty, if you deserve the death penalty, that's what you get. We just said, didn't we? You can't buy your way out of it. Well, if you need the death penalty, you deserve the death penalty, that's what you get. You're not going to get lashes instead. So Michael, I think, has got a fair point. And he's going to tell us that, it's just not true what Rava is saying. And indeed, we have a man called Rav Acha Berei de Rava, the Rav Acha, the son of Rava. So this is the son of the Rava, and I'm not sure whether it's the same Rava, actually, because if this is Rav Acha, the son of Rava, he would be a little bit reticent about contradicting his father, because that's what he's about to do. I may be wrong. David, can you help me? Is Rav Acha Berei de Rava Rava's son, the same Rava, do you think?
I think so, Johnny. Yeah.
It's a bit unusual. You wouldn't expect a son to be challenging his father's view. Maybe we'll look at that in some detail over the week, the next week, and come discuss it next week. See if we can find some information. It just occurred to me just now that it would be unusual for a pupil or a son to challenge their father like that. Although, of course, the Rashbam, who is the grandson of Rashi, often disagrees with his grandfather. But anyway, let's carry on. Amar Rav Acha Barei de Rava. Rav Acha, the son of Rava, said to Rav Ashi, Hachi, if that's the case, if Rava is right, that lashes are a bimkom, are a substitute for the death penalty, umdana, lamali, umdana. The word there in the middle comes, there's a Hebrew word, which we've already quoted today, actually, that gives us a clue as to what this word umdana means. And the word is midah. What is a midah in Hebrew?
Oh, it's where you stand, in a queue. You wait in a queue, and then you have to go into one of the booths to have your vaccination.
All right. That's an emda with an ayin, and that's the same word as we've got just above it, omedet, standing. So an emda is like we would say in England, a stand. You would go to a stand. That's with an ayin in front of it.
I think it's a quality, isn't it, Johnny? A midah.
Yes, midah does mean a quality. So if you say that, we used to say, didn't we, in the Holy Land, we used to say somebody's either got good midas or bad midas.
Yeah.
Right, which, if we said it correctly, would be midot, meaning character traits.
Yeah.
That's true, but it also means something else. In Marcel, you should know this. If you were to lakachat et midot, what would you be doing in your work? Unmute yourself and tell us.
Valuation.
Taking measements.
Correct, Marcel.
Yeah.
Marcel, I don't know if he's still working at his grand old age. I don't know, but he would have done this a lot of times in his work. He would have lakachat midot, to take measurements. So midot are measurements. A midah is a measurement. So when you have people coming to
use the quantities.
Quantities, yeah. So if you were to come, kamot is quantities really, and midot are measurements. So when you have somebody coming to do your shiputs in your house, he'll come with his meter, which is just a meter, Hebrew word for meter, and he'll come with what we would call a, what do they call that thing? What do we call that in English?
A yardstick.
Not a yardstick. A tape measure. A tape measure. A tape measure.
I use a yardstick in business.
You use a yardstick. Very good. Okay. So you'd come with a tape. You'd come with a tape measure, and he would take the midot. He would take the measurements. So a midah in modern Hebrew is a measurement, and this Aramaic word here comes from that. So what's it talking about? Rav Acha Barei de Rava says, "Ihachi, if so, umdana lamali. Why do I need measurements or an assessment?" What's he talking about? Anybody know what he's talking about? What assessment is he referring to?
Medical assessment.
A medical assessment, correct. I'm going to whiz you off now to another Gemarah, a Gemarah in Makot. What does the word Makot mean? We've just said it. Makot.
Smiting.
Lashes.
Smiting. Lashes.
Yeah, schmeissing. Lashes. You know, you got the belt, didn't you? If you were a Treifa Dodger, you got Makot. So there is a Masechet Makot. There is a tractate called Makot, which is all about punishment. It's a very, very popular Masechet to learn. Does anybody know why it's so popular to learn Masechet Makot? Yes, David.
Because it's one of the shortest Masechtas.
Correct, it is. I'm not sure if it's the shortest, but it's certainly one of the shortest. And it's the one that everybody tries to chap and finish for Ta'anit Bechorot Erev Pesach. I reckon that if you were to go round the Jewish world on Erev Pesach to the Siyum Bechorot, I reckon there would be a disproportionate number of people doing a Siyum on Makot out of all the Masechtot that there are, and there would be a disproportionately low number of people doing a Siyum on Masechet Shabbat, which of course is enormous, and an hour rate would take centuries to do. So I don't know, have you got it on the screen? I don't know if I've got you on the screen. What can you see on the screen now? Can you see Makot?
No.
No, okay, let me get you back onto this Makot then. There we go.
It was the first one I learned, but I'd forgotten it all.
Well, there you are. You see, here's your chance to relearn it. Makot, right at the end, I think, if I'm not mistaken, there's about 24 or 25 dapim in Makot. Here we're on 22a, and there is a Mishnah that says like this. Kama malkin oto. How many lashes? I love this word here. I'm going to read it in the English. This is translations from Safaria, by the way. With how many lashes does one flog a person? Flog, that's a real good old-fashioned English word. Flogging, a person gets a flogging. It's not the slang word of flog as in to sell. This means to flog in the old-fashioned method, meaning to flog, to give somebody a whipping. So how many lashes does one flog a person sentenced to receive lashes? Says the Mishnah, Arba'im, 40, Chasar Echat. 40 less 1. So 40 lashes less 1 is 39. One flogs him with 40 lashes less 1. And it quotes our pasuk that we were dealing with, which is Devarim 25. Let's just go back to that. I think I can just switch to that. Can you see Devarim 25 on the screen? Yeah. Okay. So there you go. Verse 3, Leon.
40 shall he strike him. He shall not add, lest he strike him an additional blow beyond these, and your brother will be degraded in your eyes.
So the pasuk, the Torah itself, tells us 40, but it also gives us a warning. Don't do even one more than the 40. So in good Jewish style, because we're worried that, God forbid, we might go over, we have to go under. So the Mishnah says we do one less than 40 in case we made a mistake in the count. And actually the 40th one would be the 41st. And then we would have done one too many. And the Torah is explicit and tells us we must not do more than one too many. It doesn't say you should do you shouldn't do less. I mean, it says you should do 40, so 40 is what you should do. But it specifically says you shouldn't do 41. So in order to be absolutely certain that we're not going to do 41, the Mishnah says you do 40 less 1. And it goes on to say, it quotes our pasuk, b'mispar arba'im, minyan shehu samuch, minyan shehu samuch la'arba'im, a number that shall be, as it were, close to the number 40. Rabbi Yehuda says, arba'im shleimot. No, Rabbi Yehuda says he gets the full 40. Hu lokeh, he gets 40 shmaisis. Vehechin hu lokeh et hayitera bein ketefav. And where is he flogged the extra lash, that extra 40th one? Between his shoulders, between his shoulders. And then he gives us a little clue here. The Mishnah then goes on to explain that the 39 lashes are divided into 3. 39 is divisible by 3, you get 13. And it's administered in 3 places. You get 3, it's a difference of opinion where you get them, but you get 13 in 3 different places. And Rabbi Yehuda says the extra one you get between your shoulders. And then here's our word. The Mishnah goes on to say, Ein umdin oto ela b'makot ru'uyot lehishtalesh amduho lekabel arba'im v'loke miktzat. And I'll translate it here. One assesses, okay, umdin, that same word from the word midah. One assesses the number of lashes that one is being punished, that the one being punished is capable of withstanding, only with a number of lashes fit to be divided into 3 equal groups. So, in other words, this Mishnah is telling us that you make an assessment. A person is assessed to see how many he can withstand. Because if he can only withstand 20, let's say, and you give him 40, what's going to happen? He's going to die. And that wasn't his punishment. So you can see where we're coming from now in our Mishnah, in our Gemarah. This Mishnah tells us clearly that there's an assessment. And then it goes on to say that the assessment is only something which is divisible by 3, because it's got to be in 3 different places. And he gives an example here in the commentary. If the assessment was that he can survive 20, then he only gets 18, because you can't divide 20 by 3, and he can't withstand 21 because we've already assessed him as only being able to withstand 20, and the 21st one would kill him. So he only gets 18. So if the doctors assessed him concerning that he's able to receive 40, and he's then flogged some of those 40 lashes. In other words, he gets 39, because again, it's only got to be divisible by 3. Right, then, so he gets some of those lashes, and then they assess him again. And then he concludes that he cannot receive 40. So they don't say, okay, he can have 40, and we do that all 40 in one go. No, we do a certain number, and then we reassess him. We say, how's he doing? Is he surviving these? And we say, okay, we think he can handle a few more. And then if he's not able, then we stop there, and he's exempt from the additional lashes. If the doctors initially assessed concerning that he's able to receive only 18, and then he got 18, and then he said, oh, actually, he's doing quite well here. I think we can give him the full 40. No, he's exempt from that. Once he's been assessed, he's been assessed. The point of the Mishnah is not the fine points of the assessment and how many he gets. The point is the assessment. There is such a thing as an assessment. And why is the assessment? Because we don't want to kill him. Let's go back to the Gemarah.
Steinsaltz writes a paragraph on it, the second one down.
Okay, let's just have a look at that. Let's go into the Gemarah. There's our Gemarah. Let's just have a look at first of all, let's do the Gemarah.
If the lashes is divisible by 3, can't we learn only 3 judges?
That's a bit of a dray, Johnny.
Oh, well.
Let's have a look at the Gemarah. Rav Acha Bereb's Rava says, if you're going to say that the malkut, the lashes, are in place of capital punishment, then it wouldn't matter, would it, if he dies, because it's meant to be death anyway. If so, umdana lamali. Why do I need an assessment? Lemchaye, to see whether he can let him have the it's for ima'et lemut. Let him have the lashes, and if he dies, he dies. So what? He's meant to die anyway, according to Rava's opinion. So at this point, the Gemarah is not happy with Rava's suggestion that the reason we need 23 judges is that lashes is really only a bimkom, a substitute for the death penalty. Rav Acha Bereda Rava says to Rav Ashi, I'm not having that. Doesn't make sense, because if so, that we wouldn't need an assessment now we've just described in Makot. Let's have a look at what Rav Steinsaltz says, if they assessed him to be strong enough to absorb 20 lashes, whenever an individual is sentenced to receive lashes, doctors evaluate how many lashes he is capable of withstanding without being killed. I wouldn't fancy that job, by the way. In addition, they flog him only with an amount of lashes that can be divided into 3. Therefore, if the physicians determine that he can absorb 20, he receives only 18. That's a direct quote from our Mishnah. Okay, so Rava now comes back with a retort. At the moment, the ball has just been lobbed back into Rava's court because Rav Acha Bereda Rava, Rav Acha, the son of Rava, has lobbed it back and said, your reasoning doesn't stand up. Rava then says, well, okay. No, actually, that's not true. Amalei, it wasn't Rava that said it back to Rav Acha, it was Rav Ashi. How do I know that? Because Rav Acha didn't say it to Rava, his father, maybe. He said it to Rav Ashi. I wonder why that was the case. That's interesting. If Rav Acha is the son of Rava, and he's got a question against his father's opinion, why did he express this question of his father's opinion to a third party and not to Rava himself? Don't know. Maybe he was embarrassed to do so because it was his father. Maybe his father wasn't alive. Maybe he was in a different place. Maybe he was just having a chat with Rav Ashi about it. Don't know. But either way, Amalei, Rav Ashi answers him, I suppose in a way, on behalf of Rava. And he says like this, Amakra, the verse says, which verse? Well, I'll tell you which verse. It's our verse that we've been dealing with. Verse 3 of chapter 25 of Devarim. It goes on to say, you'll remember Leon reading this out, V'nikla achicha le'inecha, and your brother will be dishonored in your eyes. Let's go back to the pasuk itself and have a look at it. There it is again, verse 3 on the screen. Read it out again for us, Leon, the whole verse 3.
40 shall he strike him. He shall not add, lest he strike him an additional blow beyond these, and your brother will be degraded in your eyes.
So again, we've got to understand what this means. V'nikla achicha le'inecha. He will become degraded. I think it's from the word, well, it's probably from the word kal, which means light. So he will be lightened, in your opinion. In other words, he will not be as honored. It could also come from the word klala, although I'd probably need another lamed if it was. Klala meaning a curse. But either way, it's translated here, I think, correctly as your brother will be degraded before your eyes. Why will he be degraded? Well, he'll be degraded because he's had more than his share. He's had 41 lashes. Why would that degrade him any more than 40 lashes? Who's counting? Well, so the Gemarah, in the form of Rav Ashi, says like this. Amalei, Rav Ashi says, Amakra, pasuk says, V'nikla achicha le'inecha, your brother will be dishonored before your eyes. And this teaches you, ki machet, when you hit him, agaba dechei machet. You strike upon the back of somebody who is chaye. What's that mean? Chaye?
Alive.
Alive, right? He's got to be alive. So after he's dead, he's not called your brother because he's only your brother when he's alive. So that's what he says. So he says, Ki machet agabadechei machit. Okay. Let's just have a look what Rav Steinsaltz says. Then your brother will be dishonored before your eyes. Some explain that the inference that the lashes may not kill the defendant is from the term dishonored. A person cannot experience embarrassment once he's deceased. Alternatively, the inference is from the term your brother, which connotes a mutual obligation to perform mitzvot. Once he's deceased and no longer obligated to perform mitzvot, he's no longer considered a brother. So the pasuk saying v'nikla achicha, here you've got two reasons why he must still be alive when he gets these lashes, and you can't just lash him to death, because he wouldn't be your brother, because a brother is only somebody who is obligated like you are, and he's not once he's dead. And again, v'nikla, he can't be dishonored once he's dead. I'm not sure that that's true, actually, that you can't be dishonored once you're dead, but I suppose you can't feel that dishonor in this world. So that means that this whole idea of letting him just be lashed to death because it's a bimkom doesn't fit. And then Ravacha, the son of Rava, carried on, and he said, hang on a minute, Hadatanya, have we not learnt in a Braita somewhere else? Amaduhu lekabel esrim ein makin oto ela makot haruyot lihishtalesh v'kama hein tmanei tzrei. Have we not learnt, and they quoted the Braita that we've spoken about before, that if they assessed him to be fit to have 20, he only gets 18 because it's got to be divisible by 3. If it's got to be divisible by 3, lemechye esrim v'chada, we're on over the page now to Daf Yud Amud Bet, page 10b. Let the court give him the full 21, because actually 21 is nearer to the 20. V'chi ma'et v'hach chada. What? And if the 21st one happens to kill him, so he's killed. So what? He's meant to be dead anyway, because according to you, it's a bimkom for death. So the Braita that tells us if he's estimated to be able to have 20, we only give him 18, must infer that we don't give him 21 because we are worried about killing him. And if we're worried about killing him, then it can't be that lashes are in place of a capital punishment, death penalty, and therefore your argument that is the reason we have 23 judges, according to Rabbi Yishmael, cannot be correct. According to the medical evaluation, he'll still be alive after the 20th lash. There would be no concern of flogging a dead man, as when the court strikes him with the 21st lash. Now I need to go on and say, okay. So you're going to tell me before we said you can't lash a dead person because it's got to be your brother. Well, he's not dead, is he? That 21st lash that you give him is the one that kills him. So when you gave it him, he was alive. He only was dead after the 21st. See the distinction? This is how sophisticated this argument is. Remember, this is from 1500 years ago, right? So
there's a saying now you can't flog a dead horse.
Yeah, well, that's right.
It must be, that's the same
exactly
thing.
what they're saying. You can't flog a dead man.
Yeah.
It's exactly that. There's no point in flogging a dead man. What's the purpose of a flog? It's to punish him. There's no point punishing him if he's dead. Yes, Howard.
You're
disturbed by this whole thing. You've had a look of disturbance on your face all day today. I've noticed you're not happy with this, Gemarah. Come on, tell us all about it.
No, I'm following it with great interest, and I'll prove it to you. First of all, you can't defame a dead person. He has no reputation after death to defend. Secondly, Kal v'chalma, translated into English law via Roman law as a fortiori, how much more so?
Correct. A fortiori. Yes, absolutely. I could never say that word without saying a rude word, so I always used to call it Kal v'chomer.
Leon knew that all anyway.
Yes, of course. So, in terms of flogging here, it's clever, isn't it, this argument? He says, well, you can't flog a dead man. But if you give him the 21st one, when you gave it him, he wasn't dead, because he could have 20 and still be alive. So when you gave him the 21st, he was alive. He was only dead at the end of the 21st. So he goes like this. He'd be alive when you gave him that 21st. Amalei, Rav Ashi says back to him, this is a ping pong match you can see between Rav Ashi and Rav Acha. Amakra, so he says, okay, I need to pull back on what I said before, but I'm quoting the second half of the pasuk, which says, "V'nikla achicha le'inecha." Your brother will be dishonored in front of your eyes. Then that means even after he's hit and he's finished being hit, he needs to be your brother, and he needs to be not be dishonored. And after that, he's not your brother anymore because he's dead. And as Howard has clearly pointed out, you can't defame a dead person. And so Rav Ashi says he's sticking by his argument. And then we come to our little symbol, and we are finished with that section. So let's just recap and then see if there's any questions. The nice little section of Gemarah, quite small section of Gemarah, which began over here saying Makot Bishlosha. It was a quote from the Mishnah way back in November 19. Makot Bishlosha, the Mishnah told us that we needed 3 judges to judge a case of lashes. And the Tanakama, we're not told who it was. It's usually Rebbe Meir when it's the Tanakama. We're not told who it is, but this particular rabbi says it's because of the word ushpatum. It's a plural judges, 2 judges, can't have 2 judges, must be 3. We then had a bit of shenanigans with some more plurals, and they tried to make it into 7, but we kicked that into touch, and the Tanakama stuck with his opinion of 3. That's what we did last week. This week, we started over here. And Rabbi Ishmael came along and taught us number 2 in his 13 exegetical principles, Gezeirah Shavah, a verbal analogy, as Rabbi Steinsaltz translates it. Gezeirah Shavah. And he brought 2 psukim, both of which had the word Rasha in it, evil person, bad person. The first of those in Bamidbar was talking about the death penalty. And if it's talking about the death penalty, it needed 23 judges. So Abaye's opinion as to why Rabbi Ishmael said 23 is because he derived 23 judges from this Gezeirah Shavah. Just as over there, we needed 3 judges in a pasuk that said Rasha, then over here, we also need 23 judges in a pasuk that uses the word Rasha. Very nice. Rava disagrees and says, we don't need a Gezeirah Shavah. It's obvious that you need 23 judges because lashes are a bimkom, a substitute for the death penalty. And if it's a substitute for a death penalty, we need the same number of judges that we would have if it was a death penalty. And that's 23. Rav Acha Bereda Rava, who might have been his son, says to his mate Rav Ashi, hang on a minute, that doesn't sound right to me, because if that's in place, lashes are in place of death, why would we need to go through all this estimation business? I then whizzed you over to Makot and showed you the estimation situation there, that there is a doctor on hand to make a medical assessment as to how much punishment this guy can take, and we don't overdo the punishment. If we were of the opinion that Makot was a bimkom, a substitute for death, we wouldn't need to bother with this whole estimation process. And so then the reply was, oh yes, we do, because we've got a pasuk in our pasuk in Dvarim, which says that this punishment of lashes has to be given to your brother, and don't give him extra because you don't want your brother to be dishonored. well, if he's dead, he's no longer your brother, and if he's dead, he can't be dishonored. So therefore, it can't be the case. And that is where we ended it. And so we come, I suppose, at the end of this scenario, Rav Acha does not have an answer to Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi has successfully deflected the argument of Rav Acha, and so we're left with the two opinions of Rava and Abaye, which is often the case. Abaye says one thing, Rava says something else. The nafkamina, how would you translate the nafkamina? The
Practical difference.
The practical difference, thank you, Liran. The practical difference is irrelevant. They both are only explaining what Rabbi Ishmael's reasoning is. They both agree that Rabbi Ishmael's opinion is that we need 23 judges. It's just that they come to explain his reasoning in two different ways. Abaye uses a Gezerah Shavah, and Rava says we don't need a Gezerah Shavah. We can learn it out from simple logic that Malkut Bimkom Mita. And so that was the end of that. So we will need Eliyahu Hanavi to come and decide the Psak Halacha eventually between the Tana Kama and Rabbi Ishmael, whether it's 3 or 23. But in the meantime, how do we paskin? Come to you in a sec, Leon, I can see your hands up. How do we paskin? Do we paskin 3 or 23? Hands up, those that think we have 3 judges. Michael Kraus, Leon, David Marks. Anyone else? Howard, 4. Who thinks it's 23? Nobody. Okay, so we've got a few sitters on the fence. That's all right. You're entitled to sit on the fence. You should have got a clue when David Marks put up his hand, because he usually knows what he's talking about. So the answer, of course, is 3. It is 3 judges. That's how we paskin for the time being, until Eliyahu Hanavi will come in days of Mashiach and tell us different. The halacha is that for lashes, we need to have 3 judges and not 23. So we paskin like the Tana Kama. And that's the end of our little section. Leon, what would you like to add?
It occurs to me that you can dishonor a dead person because the best thing that he can leave when he dies is a good name. And if he is dishonored after his death, he won't feel it, but his friends or his... I
agree. I thought the same thing. And then I looked at the pasuk. V'nikla achicha, your brother will be degraded. Well, he can't be degraded because he's dead. Yes, his children could be degraded, his memory could be degraded, his friends could be degraded, if you like. But I think the argument that Rav Ashi would put forward to you, and it's a little bit difficult to actually argue it in semantics, is the pasuk does use the word v'nikla achicha, your brother will be dishonored, and he can't be because he's dead. And it's interesting that somewhere along the line, I think it was in the Steinsaltz, he uses the word embarrassed. There we go, embarrassment there. The Steinsaltz explanation says a person cannot experience embarrassment once he's deceased.
Yes.
So I think that, I mean, I agree with the concept that you're saying, Leon, 100%, but I think that Rav Ashi would have a comeback purely on semantics.
Yes, but it's more than that, because I had a brother who is now deceased. If his name is besmirched, I would feel very annoyed, not embarrassed. I'd be very annoyed if somebody said something bad about him that wasn't true. So his name has been dishonored.
His name doesn't. I'm being devil's advocate here. One sec, Howard. I'll come back. You can come back in a sec. I'm being devil's advocate to a degree because I actually agree with a lot of what you're saying. But I think that if Rav Ashi was here, well, if he was here, he'd be a very old man, so he probably won't be saying anything because he'd be 1,500 years old. But if he was here, I think he would answer and say, it doesn't say v'nikla shem achicha le'inecha. The name of your brother is dishonored. It would say your brother is dishonored. So I think he would wheedle out of that on a semantics thing. But in the principle of what you're saying, I agree with you 100%. And I think that is, I think he's scraping the barrel with that. But nevertheless, we do see very semantic-based arguments in the Gemara. But I think the point that you raise is very true. You're absolutely right. What one takes with one is only one's good name. And there is a pasuk in Mishlei, which you'll all be familiar with. And it is what I had inscribed on my father's tombstone, which was Tov Shem Mishem and Tov. A good name is better than good oil. And that's exactly what you're saying, Leon. Howard.
No, just to say, I refer to Leon, I was giving a technical answer about how in law a reputation dies with the body, and you can't sue for defamation in relation to a dead person. But yes, Leon's right. There's nothing to be to Shem Tov now and in the afterlife.
So Rav Ashi could employ your argument, Howard, and say, I'm talking here on legal terms, not on philosophical or moral terms, because on moral terms, it's absolutely right. And in fact, I would go as far as to say that to degrade one's name or to degrade the name of somebody else is a worse punishment than flogging him, because that's something that lasts. And that's why somebody who is motzi shem ra, somebody who is who defames another person, the Gemara tells us it's ki'ilu, it's as if he's murdered him. He is like a murderer. And so I think morally and philosophically, what you are saying, Leon, is absolutely right. And Howard, what you're saying is a legal technicality, and a semantics argument could be put forward on behalf of Rav Ashi. But I think that we would all be in agreement, I think, that the philosophy of saying you can't besmirch the name of a dead person is not the case at all in moral terms, and it would be absolutely wrong to do so. David Marks, did you have a hand waving around there?
Yeah, just a couple of comments. First of all, a nice little gematria here. V'nikla achicha le'inecha. The gematria of the word le'achicha, achicha, is 39, which is a remez to the number of makas that someone gets.
Oh, I like that. That's nice.
I am disturbed by a number of things here. It appears to me that looking at the reasoning of Rabbi Yishmael, the penalty of makas is very, very serious indeed. And although we know why we paskin according to the Tanakh Stam Mishnah, Halacha Stam Mishnah, it appears to be more logical to follow Rabbi Yishmael's argument with the severity. In fact, I've got in front of me, there are a list of 168 lavim in the Torah that one gets malchus for rather than the strict death penalty. And some of them look pretty severe to me. Also, interestingly and unusually in the Gemarah, we've got the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael, but the Gemarah doesn't bring down what the Tanakhama's dissenting view was.
You mean what the Tanakhama would answer Rabbi Yishmael?
No, yeah, the Rabbi Yishmael uses the Gezeirah Shava. Okay. Yes. But there's no
Rabbi Yishmael.
There's no counter argument from the Tanakhama to justify 3 rather than 23 judges.
except that Rabbi Yishmael himself does not use the Gezeirah Shava. It's Abaye coming along a long time after Rabbi Yishmael who suggests the Gezeirah Shava. We don't know.
Yes, but that's the style of the Gemarah, to say my timer, and it's an Amora who brings down the opinion of a Tana. That's always the case.
But then it would have to be an Amora who would bring back the reasoning of the Tanna Kama, not the Tanna Kama himself.
And no one does.
Granted, I just wanted to point out, but it wouldn't be the Tanna Kama himself that did that.
No. You're right. But here we've got no Amora that's prepared to stand up for the opinion, which is the accepted halacha.
That is interesting, I guess. Okay, well, maybe subconsciously, that's why I said we'll wait for Eliyahu Hanavi to come and overturn it, because I suppose that subconsciously, I was saying like you that you know, flogging is a pretty serious business, and it should be done with a big court to make sure that justice is done correctly. So that's an interesting point. Okay, very interesting. Any other comments before we close? Yes, Johnny. You're muted, Johnny. Unmute.
On the Gezeirah Shava, at the bottom of Rabbi Steinsaltz's paragraph on the right, it says that certain restrictions were put on the use of this principle to prevent unfounded conclusions from being drawn. Most significantly, one cannot infer a verbal analogy on one's own. It is valid only if it is based on received tradition. So more people must have agreed with Abaya. He couldn't have done it on his own.
No, well, he can. Abaya can.
It's not a fact.
He's talking to us. We can't do. I've fallen foul of this many a time. Many a time, in a Gemarah shir, over the years, I came up with what I thought was a brilliant Gezeirah Shava, right? Which usually was to put an or in the Gemarah shir that I was in, and just to bring a Gezeirah Shava to mess things up and to give a different opinion. I can't tell you how many times I did that as a teenager in Manchester Yeshiva in Schmag's class, and I would get told straight away, "No time, we've got to move on," because you can't do that. You can't. There are Gezeirah Shavas that are brought by tradition, and an Amora like Abaye can bring a Gezeirah Shava. A Shmerel like me in the 20th century, as it was then, cannot bring his own Gezeirah Shava. Okay, and that's what Rabbi Steinsaltz is pointing out. That just because there is a principle, let's say you've got the word Vayomer. Right? How many times in the Torah does it says Vayomer? You can't just pull out two psukim that have got Vayomer in it and make your own Gezeirah Shava of it. No, you can't do that. That's just being dafka, which is what I was being back in the day. No, you're only allowed to use a Gezeirah. You're only allowed to make up a Gezeirah Shava if you're an Abaye or a Rava or an Amora or somebody like that. You can't just sort of come along, and that's why he's pointing.
No. And also Gezeirah Shava is halakha l'Moshe Misinai.
The concept of that of Gezeirah Shava is that, and it's almost as if
it's restricted.
Yeah, it's almost as if there was like if you like, a fountain of Gezeirah Shavas, like a bucket full of Gezeirah Shavas that Moshe gave from Sinai. And at various times in history, people like Abaye would put their hand in and pull one out, kind of thing, right? And that would have been one in the bucket, as it were. The ones that I was making, they weren't in Moshe's bucket, so they didn't count. Okay. Any other comments? That was really interesting, I think.
Excellent, Chair.
All right, let's reconvene next week, please God, and we'll carry on a new subject. Let's just have a look what we're going to be doing. We're going to have a look at something which does make a big difference to our lives, and that is Ibur HaChodesh, the intercalation of a month, which have you noticed, this is just a heads up for next week, have you ever noticed that when people talk about Yom Tov, they'll say, oh, it's early this year, or oh, it's late this year. Have you ever heard anyone ever say, oh, it's just on time this year? Nobody ever says that. It's either early or it's late. So we're going to find out what that's all about next week. Ibor HaChodesh, adding in an extra month, Adar Sheni. That's what we're going to be learning about next week.
If you can explain that to me, you'll be a genius.
Well, we'll try next week, Leo. We'll try.
Yes.
Between us, we'll see if we can manage.
Yeah.
All right.
Many thanks for the lovely
Thank you,
share.
Johnny. Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Johnny.
Morning. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.